This is one of those just show up types of episodes. This is my 49th episode, and that means that I've been doing this for 49 weeks, 49 straight weeks with a podcast episode. And I know it's been 49 weeks because I made the contract with myself, the internal contract, which I've also publicly stated at the start of creating this podcast. I was like, there is going to be one episode every single week. Every single Wednesday, there will be a podcast episode. And I've had the opportunity to interview some incredible people, talk about their experiences, their wisdom, their journey, their work, ask them really interesting questions about all of that. But there have also been some weeks where I created solo episodes because, like I've talked about, podcasting isn't just about connecting with other people and talking with other people, but I also see it as a medium and a platform to talk with yourself and just share your voice and whatever you want to talk about rather than simply giving the stage over to somebody else. And I like to do both. And I like interviewing more people rather than just using this podcast for me to talk, but it's always nice to have certain weeks where it's just solo episodes. And solo episodes in the past have had clear topics or clear stories or clear pieces of insights or wisdom that I wanted to share. And I could have done that for this week as well. There are certain stories or experiences that I know I will make solo episodes about, but for this one, it just felt right not to do that rather than simply just like this episode is, hey, I'm just showing up. I'm going to be here. I'm sticking to that contract. So there's really not much to talk about here. If anything, the piece of wisdom or the takeaway or what the title of this episode will be is just about the power of consistency, the power of showing up, the power of just continuing to stay after something. I had an episode that I thought would be lined up with a guest this week. Unfortunately, that fell through, didn't end up recording it. And I was like, all right, I'm sticking to that contract though, especially in a space like this with podcasting where it's so easy to get off of that routine of not showing up on a consistent basis. But I was like, an episode every single Wednesday, no matter what. And this week, even more in particular, I could have made the excuse to myself just because who knows, if you watch a lot of these episodes on YouTube, maybe you do, maybe you don't. There's a pretty big different backdrop behind me. And the backdrop that I had for the first 49 episodes will be no more. And that's because I have moved locations. I have moved physical locations. I have moved to Austin, Texas. And I've talked about that in previous episodes, especially the one where I did have a different backdrop for one of them. And I recorded that episode when I was in Austin, Texas in the end of October, start of November. And now I'm back here full time. I mean, it's crazy to think that this is where I live now. I have lived in the Northeast my entire life. And now I just picked up my entire life. It's crazy to hear it, but like I live in Texas now. And that's also why I wanted to create this episode this way. where it really just wasn't about anything because I wanted for me to be able to look back on this episode with this backdrop because I'm memorializing right now this next chapter of my life, this next stage of being in Texas. This truly does feel like, wow, this is volume two, chapter two, the next chapter, whatever you want to call it. Like from when I was born up until this move, that felt like chapter one. Like when I graduated college, that didn't feel like, okay, next stage of my life. It really didn't. But making this massive move, pretty much moving alone, knowing some people, but not a lot of people, and just like, this feels like something that I have to do. And there was some discomfort behind that. There was some pain behind that in a way of like, ooh, like this feels like a little shaky or a little off, just from the standpoint of, hey, this is very new. Like this, you've never done this before. But that always came back to me knowing and believing that this is something that I have to do and the right move to make. And I've come to learn about myself that I feel like I thrive the most when there's that little bit of hesitation or a little bit of discomfort or resistance. Like when I'm in those types of environment where I just feel like a little shakiness or a little tough feelings, that is when I truly feel like I shine my brightest. And so when I knew, I was like, ooh, I'm feeling these feelings a little bit about moving here, I was like, you're doing the right thing. Doesn't mean that it's not scary, but I knew that I was like, this is what I got to do. So tying things back into this episode with that, I just wanted to show up and be here for me. This is kind of just like an episode for me, but also, like I've said, just continuing to show up no matter what. And that's what it means to outwork, tying it back to what it means to outwork. No matter what is going on, no matter what is on your plate, just showing up each day, just stacking days. Some days there will be a lot of progress that's made and you will take big steps forward. And then there will be days where, hey, this is just a show up day. Because even on the days when you are able to show up, you are creating that mental wiring of, hey, no matter what is going on, I'm just continuing to do this. Because yes, it might feel a little uncomfortable or tired in the moment, but you're continuing that process. You are further developing and ingraining that mindset of, this is what I do. I will just continue to show up. I will continue to put in the work because it may feel tiring in the moment, but I know what will eat me up more personally when it comes to this episode is if I made the thought or if I had the idea of like, you know what, I'm just going to take the week off. It would annoy me a lot if I saw on streaming platforms or whatever, like, oh, episode 48 was this day. And then episode 49 was 2 weeks later. I was like, ooh, like, I just don't like that. I just don't like how that feels. And I don't want to feel that. And that's something that I think I really developed actually at a young age. And I think that came from working out and nutrition, where I feel like sometimes I would cheat or slack off in different ways. And it wouldn't feel good in the moment. Or like, wow, like, why did I do that? That really just didn't feel good. And, just messed with my head. And then I'm like, all right, well, let me get back on plan. And then I feel like I got to a point where there would be moments where I wanted to cheat or I would want to slack. But before I actually did that, I would be able to embody the mindset or be able to feel what it would be like if I did cheat or if I did slack before I actually did it. And I'm like, ooh, this does not feel good right now. And I want to get rid of this feeling. So, you know what? I am going to stay on plan. And that's a powerful thing, I think, to be able to do. When you're able to feel like what that scenario would look like that you wouldn't want to happen before it actually does happen, and then reroute it so that you stay on track, you stay consistent, you continue to outwork, you continue to stay with your process. That's what success looks like, I think. That's what that's what excellence looks like in my eyes. And that's what I try to hold myself to. So this is going to be a really short one. This doesn't have to go on for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. That's how a lot of my episodes are. A lot of my solo episodes have been 30 to 40 minutes. When I interview people, it's about an hour. But for this one, this is, like I said, this is just I'm showing up. I'm just going to continue to show up. And I got a funny feeling that I think this episode that I'm making right now will be the one that I look back on with the most excitement, appreciation, and joy about, because like I said, I'm memorializing this moment of this next chapter in my life. And I'm going to look back and see myself. And I already do this with earlier episodes. Sometimes I'll look back at the first episode of this entire podcast, The Outworker, or my first guest podcast. And I'm like, wow, like, look at where I was and look at where we are now. And I can almost like go back and embody who that person was then, while also simultaneously embodying who I am in this present moment, and just see that growth and see that transformation. And I feel like this episode is going to be a big piece of evidence for that as well, where I will look back on this and be like, wow, like this was my first week, not even week, been in Austin, Texas for 4 days. Be like, wow, like that was the start. So continue to show up for yourself, most importantly. Show up for yourself. It's not for anyone else. Show up for yourself. Continue to outwork. And I'll see you in the next episode.